Good day, everyone. The Day the Dancers Game is written by Bienvenido and Santos, one of the greatest Filipino writers. Santos is one of the contributors in Philippine literature, wherein he wrote several stories and among others. The story is all about two Filipino men living in Chicago for several years. The major characters in this story includes Philemon Akayan, and Antonio Bataler, while minor characters include the Filipino children dancers. Contemporary Philippine life is punctuated by departures and returns, by diaspora and migration. The story also shows the migration, diaspora, eh, um, homesickness, and alienation.
Bienvenido and Santos was born in Tondo, Manila on March 22, 1911. The Philippines then was under the colony of the United States, so the medium of instruction was in English.
The plot centers on the short stories' two main protagonists, Philemon Akayan, a 50-year-old, now a U.S. citizen, and Antonio Batalier, a former Pullman porter who is suffering from a rare skin disease and has been bedridden for almost 2 years. It was early November when the streets of the West Sheridan Road were covered with snow. For Phil, the snow fell perhaps in participation of the young and elegant dancers from the Philippines who have just arrived. For Tony, perhaps it is a sign of a dreaded cancer.
Phil was so excited with the coming of the dancers that he planned to invite them to the apartment he and Tony were staying for the last 10 years. He imagined that despite the apartment's small size, the delicious chicken adobo, the well-stocked Releno, and his warm hospitality will make up for it, and the dancers will enjoy their stay at the apartment. Unfortunately, Phil's imagination was far from reality. The dancers came, but perhaps they were too young or too elegant to accept an invitation from an old stalker-like man. And the day the dancers came, Phil felt inferior and poorer than
He
ever.
felt as if he was being directly detached from his roots in the Philippines and alienated by the young Filipinos and Filipinas who have arrived in his newfound land in Chicago. Nevertheless, he still pursued his love and admiration to the young dancers. He recorded the troupe's performance in his old portable tape recorder in hopes of inspiring Tony, who was not as excited as he was.
Go!
The day the dancers came ended with Phil in despair. He lost his memories of the dancers as he mistakenly erased the performance.
Go!
The themes in the story, The Day the Dancers Came, are migration, alienation, and homesickness. Migration because Tony and Phil migrated to Chicago from the Philippines. Alienation because Phil felt alienated as soon as the dancers arrived in the US. And then homesickness because Phil misses his life in the Philippines before because all these years he lived in Chicago with Tony.
Like most stories, the day the dancers came used a lot of literary devices to add depth and intensity to the story. To name a few of these literary devices, we have simile, hyperbole, foreshadowing, climax, and pun. For the example of simile, wherein Phil stated that he used the phrase like white man, wherein he's a Filipino and usually Filipinos are fair in complexion compared to Americans, so that's simile. Hyperbole was when there was a part also when Phil stated that I will be in your service, I will be in your command, and I will be your servant, which those three things mean the same thing. And hyperbole means the exaggeration of a statement, and that's it. Pun, for example, in the story they used kids to express women who dance in clubs, and that's sort of funny because it's two old men talking about kids, wherein they're not really kids but women dancing. Also, the climax of the story is the part wherein the whole story was based on the dancers, and that was they were arguing, talking about the dancers, and the climax came wherein the unfortunate news of the death of one of them came, and that changed the whole scenario of the story. Foreshadowing came out in the story on the part wherein they talked about bombs going out, and I believe that bombs symbolizes the death of someone. So that's it for the
Woke up and he noticed a whiteness outside. And Phil knew that it was snowing and he shouted.
Snow! It's snowing!
Tony, who was sleeping in the adjoining room, was awakened.
What's that?
It's snowing! Oh, they love this. They surely love this.
Who loved that?
The dancers, of course. I think they've arrived. I'm sure they arrived. And they walk in the snow, and I'm sure they love the snow.
How do you know it was snowing in New York?
Snow in New York in November? Are you crazy?
I'm becoming a white man. Who's crazy? Ever since you heard that the dancers was from the Philippines, you're going loco or nuts. What's happening to you? I'm becoming a white man.
I know who's nuts. It's the sick guy with the sick thoughts. You don't care about anything else but your pain. Nothing but your pain.
What for that I got tired? Wait.
You're old man, and sick. It's not cancer. We're all going to die someday.
I discovered a new way to keep afloat.
Who wants to float?
Just in case if you're in a ship and it's sinking.
Never mind about shipwrecks. Let's talk about the dancers.
But it's important. What if we're in a ship and it's sunk? So we need to keep floating for our safety.
What indefinitely? What did the doctor say, Tony?
So they didn't come after all.
Tony, what did the doctor say?
I knew they wouldn't come, but that's okay. What did it look like?
Ah, Tony, they were beautiful. The grace, their eyes. It was wonderful. Tony? Tony! Oh no, I've lost them all!
Good day, everyone. The Dream of Goldfish is written by our very own Filipino writer named Naya Valdenor, a quite elite teacher in literature and writing composition. Naya is also one of the greatest contributor in the Philippine literature, wherein her styles in writing poems are in a Pinoy style. The usual settings of her poems are in the Philippines. The poem is actually a dream of a girl having a goldfish and then suddenly it dies because of someone who punctured the plastic with the goldfish using a pencil. As you can see in this poem, it portrays the different levels of poetry, such as the literal level, metaphorical level, and metaphysical level.
Giovanna Naya S. Baldalon grew up in Manila, Philippines. She graduated in 2002 with a BFA in Creative Writing from the Ateneo de Manila University. In the same year, she was a fellow for poetry and English in the 41st Dumaguete National Writers Workshop. And in 2004, she won first place in the Carlos Palanca Awards for Poetry in English.
Inside the GFD is a bespectacled student holding a clear plastic bag containing a goldfish that is punctured by a girl which wets the toes of the passengers. The student shook the girl's shoulder for an explanation, and the girl suddenly imagined how the student could react. The student could rush out of the jeepney and find a bench for her thin friend, or she could burst into tears and let the plastic bag tangle into her fingertips. Or maybe she could snap and grabbed the pencil from the girl's hand and shoved it to the left nostrils of the girl. But despite of this imagination, the student instead handed the bag and stepped out into the Quezon Boulevard. And that all of this are just a dream of the girl and nothing really happens.
The poem speaks more about a certain person who was deeply in love, but it turns out that it was all out of love. The person was so alone in the world, like the goldfish inside the bag with the water in it. Puncturing the bag with a pencil symbolizes the many problems that arises in a relationship. And because of that, many people will be affected, like the gushing out of water in the bag and wetting the passenger's toes. It came to the point that the person asked God for an explanation because of what was happening in their relationship. But in the end, moving on and giving up was the best solution, like the slowly twitching and dying of the goldfish.
When you say metaphorical interpretation of a story, it may differ depending on the person or the reader. It may give out a lot of meanings. For me, the metaphorical sense of the story of the dream of goldfish is that the symbolism of the plastic bag of the fish is like a world wherein when someone accidentally punctures it, it will have a very big impact on the life inside the fish and the people around it. When the story, on the part of the story wherein the person holding the goldfish was looking at the fish with intent and love, and then suddenly someone just punctured it, his world suddenly collapsed. And in a metaphorical sense, it's saying that when people enter someone's life, you may either develop the life or destroy the life. And that's it.
The dream of goldfish. It's the unlikely who are best able to squeeze into the crevices of our minds. The way the bespectacled student did on one of those protracted jeep rides home. I remember thinking her sneakers must have boasted whiteness once. In the clear plastic bag she was clutching was a miniature sun. No, a goldfish. If it had been shivering with a partner, perhaps the urge to puncture the bag with a pencil would not have welled up so insistently. And in the light of rush hour, I suspected Newton was wrong. More than one feature could swim away from the swoosh of a single action. Water could gush out of the wound, wetting passengers' toes, while the girl's hands shook my shoulder for an explanation. She could rush out of the vehicle to find a method of salvation, trusting in traffic to avenge her famed friend. Guilt could tug at my sleeves if she burst into tears and let the bag dangle from her fingertips. My act finally tipping her into despair. Or she could snap, grab the still wet pencil from my hand and shove it up my left nostril. I thought I could love her forever if she heaved a sigh of thanks and flung the bag, frantic fish and all, out onto the elliptical road's range. What would I have done? She handed the bag to me like Sharon giving up his oar before stepping out onto 12th Quezon Boulevard. That I am telling this in the subjunctive reveals nothing about the orange fins twitching for life on the drenched floor of my dreams.